Hey, everybody. Welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Congressman James Clyburn with us today. We'll chat with him in just a moment. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So James Clyburn represents South Carolina's 6th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives, where he previously served as Majority Whip. A more than 30-year congressional veteran, he has been an influential and effective legislative leader and an unwavering voice for civil rights. Born in Sumter, South Carolina during the Jim Crow era, he has been awarded the NAACP's highest honor, the Spingarn Medal, the Lyndon Baines Johnson Foundation's Liberty and Justice for All Award, the Harry S. Truman Foundation's Good Neighbor Award, and holds honorary degrees from 40 colleges and universities. In 2024, he was bestowed the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. And he's here to discuss his terrific new book, The First Eight, a personal history of the pioneering black congressman who shaped a nation. Congressman, welcome into the back room.
Thank you very much for having me.
So before we get to your book, I just got to ask you about the biggest news story right now, which is this Doubel-Tap, kill everybody strike order, reportedly given by SecDef Pete Hegseth, in which 2 survivors of a bombing of an alleged narco-terrorist drug boat were killed as they literally were clinging to a piece of the boat. Do you believe this was an unlawful order, and will there be congressional investigations into what many are calling a war crime?
Well, I do believe it was unlawful. I only spent 2 years in Reserve Officers Training Corps, but I did learn in those 2 years a little bit about how one should conduct themselves in the military. And of course, since I've been in the Congress, I've stayed in close contact with these issues. And I come from an HBCU, South Carolina State University, a land grant school that took the charter or the legislation that created these 1890 schools to heart. In most HBCU land grant schools, the A&M stands for agriculture and mechanical. In South Carolina State, it was also military. In fact, when I came here to Congress, that little HBCU in Orangeburg, South Carolina, had produced more African-American general officers than all the service academies combined. Today, over 23. So we took to heart these protocols. South Carolina itself, I represent Fort Jackson, Charleston Air Force Base, as well as 2 National Guard honoraries. And we take these things to heart. And I am very, very concerned that this seems to be a game with people in this administration. And that kind of flippant comment needs to be thoroughly investigated, and we need to get to the bottom of exactly who said what, when, and why.
And you think Congress is going to ultimately do that?
I do think so. And I think it's going to be bipartisan.
Mm-hmm. Hegseth first said that he saw the entire attack. Then he flipped and said he was there only for the initial strike. Senator Rand Paul said Hegseth is, quote, either incompetent or lying. We now see an IG report that came out today which showed that he put the military lives in grave danger over the SIgnalGate episode. Do you agree with Senator Paul?
Yes, I do. I think he's very flippant. I think much of this is a game with him. He seemed not to value the lives of others as much as you would expect from someone who has the highest military and defense position in our nation.
Do you think they're scapegoating Admiral Frank Bradley? I mean, today, Trump put out a statement where he said unequivocally, I stand behind and support Pete Hegseth. What should happen to Hegseth What do you think is going to happen here?
I don't know what's going to happen. I will leave it up to the investigation to find out exactly how much he is involved in all of this, exactly who gave the order. But it seems to me that whoever gave that order violated protocol as it relates to the military.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's strong language, but do you see it as a war crime?
Well, I don't know. I will let the investigation come to that conclusion if that is where the facts take it. But let's wait on the investigation.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about your book. Congratulations on the release. It's called The First Eight, a personal history of the pioneering Black congressmen who shaped a nation. What was the moment or event that finally convinced you, after decades of public service, that you needed to write The First Eight?
Well, a lot of things. I used to teach history in Charleston, South Carolina, to high school students. And my dad, when I was a kid, made me learn everything in the world about Robert Smalls. And one would have thought that he was the only African-American to serve in the Civil War. But learning history at South Carolina State University, where its first president, Thomas E. Miller, was the seventh African-American to serve in Congress from South Carolina. Robert Smalls was number 6. These things I just knew. Mm-hmm. But then one day, I'm here in my office or in my conference room in the whip office, and a group came to see me, and one person in the group asked me about those 8 pictures that was on the wall of my conference room. And when I told the group who they were, one of them said, "My goodness, I thought that you were the first African-American from South Carolina." And later that day, I said to my staff, I said, "No, my next book, this is my 3rd book, is going to be about these 8 people because they need to be introduced properly to the American public." Mm-hmm. And so that's what started me to write. But I wasn't all that, I mean, I was serious about the writing, but I didn't see it as being anything but a book to just a passion, so to speak. But then all of a sudden, I'm in the middle of the project, and the 2020 election and its aftermath came about. And here we were, the aftermath to the election, trying to set up these alternative electors up there in Michigan and Pennsylvania, trying to get the authorities down in Georgia to produce 11,700 votes, whatever the number was. And I said to myself, wait a minute. This is the kind of stuff that happened back in the 1870s that brought an end to the careers of these people and the beginning to Jim Crow. And so I just went back and started rewriting the book. And rather than making it just an introduction of 8 really little-known people, I decided that this book had to be something different because I saw it happening, and it's still happening today, exactly what happened after the 1876 presidential election, when 3 states, South Carolina being one of them, sent up alternative electors through the election into the House of Representatives, and we brought an end to Reconstruction and the beginning to Jim Crow.
The book profiles these 8 pioneering, highly consequential, historic Black congressmen with vastly different backgrounds and political philosophies. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, it's kind of interesting. These 8 people, I always say it. In fact, I wrote in the introduction to my memoir that we can be no more, nor can we be any less than what our experiences allow us to be. And no place will you find that more evident than in the lives of these 8 gentlemen. Only 3 of the 8 were ever enslaved. And the three of them, each one of them got their freedom differently. One, of course, got his freedom because the first one, Joseph Rainey, his father purchased his family's freedom. And then Robert Smalls, in that famous escape, I call it the Great Escape, from slavery. And then, of course, George Washington Murray. Murray got his, he was the only one that was emancipated. These were, most of them, highly educated. Thomas Miller, number 7 in the group, became the first president of South Carolina State, graduated from the University of South Carolina Law School back in the 1870s, graduated from Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. George Washington Murray went to college himself, Grantsville, was highly educated, DeLarge, very educated. Robert Brown Elliott, an attorney himself, and business people. Smalls was an incredible businessman. So was Joseph Rainey. So was Ramsey. These guys were very consequential to the times within which they lived. And they did not always get along with each other because, once again, their backgrounds were different. And I think it gives a lesson in what I think is a problem in all too many instances today. People seem to group people as like all Black people think alike. No, we don't. I stayed married to the same woman for 15 years. I can tell you, we don't think alike. So these people, though they did not always agree, they kept focused on the things they had to do. And so I wrote this book the way I did so that people will see that we can be united and not be unanimous. Mm-hmm. So that people can also see that anything that's happened before can happen again. And also wanted people to understand the power of one vote. Because Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Abraham Lincoln, set out to undo everything Abraham Lincoln had done to make our democracy applicable to everybody. Well, he got impeached for it. But the Senate failed to convict him by one vote. Then came the 1876 election, which got thrown into the House of Representatives. When the House couldn't figure out what to do, they appointed a 15-member commission to go out and study the issue, to meet with the candidates and come back with a recommendation. They recommended by a vote of 8-7 to give the disputed votes to Rutherford B. Hayes. And Rutherford B. Hayes, in return, rewarded them by bringing it in to Reconstruction. And that led to Hayes becoming president by a vote of 195 to 194. And that's what started Jim Crow. So these three critical things in the history of African Americans in this country, all three of them, or each one of them, decided by one vote.
Of these 8 men, is there one in particular whose overall journey resonates most with you in terms of your own?
Absolutely. But ain't even close. Robert Smalls. I made it very clear in this book what I think of Robert Smalls. I think he's the most consequential South Carolinian who ever lived. Now, a lot of people who study antebellum history will say it's John C. Calhoun. The people who study modern history might come up with Strom Thurmond. But if you look at the consequences that flowed from one's life, nobody can touch Robert Smalls. And not just in South Carolina. I do believe you can look at it on a much broader scale. A guy born enslaved, pull off one of the most dramatic escapes in the history of the country, of the world, really. And then without any kind of formal education. This guy became the first Black person to be a captain in the Navy, turning his earnings into great wealth. Was the one that introduced the resolution in the 1868 Constitution, South Carolina Constitutional Convention, introduced a resolution that established free public education for all. You just look, I think the most important thing was he was the one that talked Abraham Lincoln into allowing freed Blacks to fight on the side of the Union in the Civil War. And Lincoln said at the end of the war that but for those freedmen, that war would have been lost. He was the one that did that. Frederick Douglass was a very close friend to Abraham Lincoln. He spent a lot of time trying to get Abraham Lincoln to allow Blacks to serve in the war, and he couldn't do it. Robert Smalls met with Lincoln August 1862, less than 6 months out of slavery, and Lincoln authorized him to go back and recruit Blacks to serve in that war. So when you look at the consequences that flowed from one's life, nobody touched Robert Smalls, not among these 8, not among the millions of South Carolinians who ever existed.
And the first 8, they faced fierce efforts to block Black political power. You touched on this a little bit before. What parallels do you see between those efforts in the 1870s and the voter restriction efforts we see today?
It is almost like you seeing the morning papers when you read this book. In this book, we go through how they undertook to deny voting rights. The 1866 Civil Rights Act, still the strongest Civil Rights Act. There are lawyers who today are still using the 1866 Civil Rights Act in the courts. Not the 1960s. The 1964 Civil Rights Act was a great act. But the 1866 one, created by these guys, still is the best vehicle in most instances fighting these cases. But if you look at redistricting being the big thing today, look in this book and you will see that what is happening with the Supreme Court getting rid of the effects of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the Supreme Court now allowing racial gerrymandering to exist to limit the power of people of color under the auspices of politics rather than race, but everybody knows the results of one's efforts will determine the outcome rather than trying to figure out one's intent. So what happened back then is exactly what is happening today. And if you look at Project 2025 and then look at that edict written by General Marshall, I call it Matthew sometimes, but it's not Matthew, General Gary, Witherspoon Gary. His edict, I think, was the foundation for Project 2025. And so if you look at all of us, and one of the great parallels is that when they set out to visit all of this vicious behavior, violence, if you please, to try to keep people from participating in the democracy, they were told, when you go to these meetings, when you go out to carry out your responsibilities, wear red shirts. Today, red caps.
Yep.
You go through it, it's all there. And so I think that anybody who really want to get an understanding of exactly what's happening around us today, you'll find what you need to know in this book.
Yeah, I always say that the red cap is today's white hood, you know?
But a lot of people don't realize that the red shirts, if you think about the red coats during the Revolutionary War, but they were instructed to wear red shirts.
Mm,
And I believe they're copying that with the red caps.
yeah. Given your own decades in Congress, did writing this book change your perspective on your role or influence over those 30 plus years on what you see as the obligations of contemporary Black lawmakers in terms of both leadership and just political survival?
Didn't change a thing. Reinforce, yes. Because, I guess I was in kindergarten when I first heard about Robert Smalls. A lot of people surprised to find out that this 85-year-old guy, his church, when I was growing up, my mother had a kindergarten in our church. And so my dad, who was denied an education himself, worked hard to make sure that would not befall his three sons. And so we were made to read newspapers every day. We had to give my daddy a current event report every night before going to bed, and we did not have television. So I grew up with this, and so much of what I have developed by writing this book only reinforced that which I grew up with. The same stuff that led me to sit in those jails back in 1960, challenging the status quo. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm going to Columbus, Georgia, to Columbus, Ohio, this weekend to help Joyce Beatty celebrate Rosa Parks Day. She has this big Rosa Parks event every year. And I'm going to have fun on Friday, letting those people know that what Rosa Parks did, 70 years ago? In fact, it was on the 5th of December that started the Montgomery movement. A lot of people think that when she sat down that bus, that was the first time that ever happened. No, it happened way back in 1865 as well.
Wow.
And so I'm going to have fun with this on Friday, letting people know that so much of what we, just like that lady who said that she thought I was the first African-American to serve, and was surprised to find out that I'm the ninth. It's the same thing with so much that happened today. It's not the first time.
Well, speaking of history, writing about history often involves difficult truths, which include racism, violence, betrayal, backsliding. How did you balance telling those painful truths with offering hope or lessons for the future?
Well, I don't know if I balanced it well, but I know this. I didn't hold back. Not just as it relates to interracial, but intraracial. There's a whole section of this book, a whole chapter that I devote to colorism. And that, to me, was one of the big downfalls of the eight. I say they were not perfect. In fact, the campaign between number 7 and number 8 was all about skin color. One of the interesting things, though, that I like to point out is that I talk about them not having the same background and experiences. One of these 8 was African-American by choice. He really was not African-American. He was white, but he had been adopted by an African-American family. And when Miller went off to college in Pennsylvania, one would think that he was outside of this now, that he would stay in the North. No, he went back to South Carolina and took the cause up. And he wrote about it on his tombstone, which is on the pages of this book. I went and found his grave and took a picture of his tombstone because I wanted people to see in his own words that he knew that he was not Black. but made the choice to be so.
What do you hope readers, especially younger readers or people unfamiliar with Reconstruction history, what do you hope they take away from this book about the long arc of Black political representation in America?
That it's never, ever on a linear plane, that it's like a pendulum. And I explain this in the epilogue of this book. Our whole body politic in this country moves like a pendulum on the clock, right to left, back right again, back left again, and it runs that way throughout our history. And it's only the intervention of the voters or the people that can arrest that movement and keep it from going too far right or too far left. How long it stays in one position all depends upon the voter. And so that's why it's so important for us to be involved in this process. And I get very upset when I hear people say, my one vote won't matter. Well, just remember, Reconstruction came to an end by one vote. Jim Crow became the law of the land by one vote. One vote matters.
Yeah, I always tell people Election Day is the one day out of the year that janitors and billionaires have the same exact power.
Absolutely.
And if the first 8 could look at America today, its progress, its setbacks, what do you think they'd say?
They'll be very, very disappointed because they made some significant commitments to making things better. Even when they didn't agree with each other, they kept focused on trying to live out. And you see it in all of their writings and all of their speeches. They were fighting, trying to overcome these headwinds that led to Jim Crow, all the way down. And most of them died from broken hearts. I always tell people Robert Smalls lived a relatively long time, but I think he died in 1915 more from a broken heart than anything else, because Robert Smalls, in spite of all of his splendor and all, everything that happened to him, he ended up getting indicted and imprisoned because they used the judicial system to get rid of these folks. Does that sound familiar?
I was going to say some strange parallels to what's going on right now.
Absolutely.
Congressman,
same thing happened to George Washington Murray. George Washington Murray ended up, I'm going to visit his grave this spring because he died in Chicago after being indicted and convicted and sentenced to 6 years of hard labor. And he escaped to Chicago and never came back. Used the judicial system. Every one of these people, in one way or another, had the system used against them unfairly, and it's still happening today.
Yeah, unfortunately, history does have a way of repeating itself, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. But I warn people, just because the events repeat themselves does not mean that the results have to be the same.
Right. Congressman, thanks so much for coming on and talking about all this. Good luck with the book. Again, it's called The First 8, A Personal History of the Pioneering Black Congressmen Who Shaped a Nation. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
All righty. Take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Maddie Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.